Today, we are delighted to have Dr. Ramazan Saral discussing a very fresh and intriguing approach to Milton and Blake, in which we can clearly see the shared interest and fascination with the topic of contraries of antithetical images. Today's guest, Ramazan Saral, works as a research assistant in the Department of English Language and Literature at Erzurum University, Turkey. He recently finished his PhD on Blake and Mythopoeia. He's interested in poetry, British Romanticism, drama, and fantasy literature. He also writes his own poetry, and his work has been published in Vala. How great is that? So over to you, Ramazan. Yeah, if you can unmute yourself, Ramazan.
Sure, yes.
Thank you.
I hope you can hear me. And
yes.
You can see the presentation.
Yes.
Okay. Take some time to start. So, yes. Okay. During the fall semester, as I was teaching L'Allegro and Il Penseroso, I realized something familiar within these two poems, complementary poems of Milton, but I couldn't exactly put it. Then I read it again. I read these two poems again, and then realized that they have a similar cadence and musicality with Blake's Songs of Innocence and of Experience. I thought it was an obvious connection, but then when I searched, I couldn't find anything written on them, except for some articles written on Blake's drawings on L'Allegro and Il Penseroso. So today, my topic is how L'Allegro and Il Penseroso might have influenced Blake's conception of the contrary states of the soul in his Songs of Innocence and of Experience, showing the two contrary states of the human soul. Before I begin, I will focus on why Milton is important to Blake. Because Blake's poem, Milton, a poem, is the only epic poem in the world that I know of that has a protagonist as a poet as a protagonist. Milton becomes the protagonist of the poem. And in 1800, Blake wrote to his friend Flaxman, "Milton loved me in childhood and showed me his face." It is very important because Blake's drawings of, I'm sorry, I think I lost the sharing screen, so
we're still seeing you, Ramazan. We're still seeing the sharing screen.
Oh, okay. Now I can see it again and again. Sorry, I misclicked something. So in 1803, Blake wrote to Thomas Butts. It's very similar to his hymn on the Nativity, which you will find among his smaller poems and will read with great delight. This is very important because Blake's drawings of L'Allegro and Il Penseroso date to 1816. And Blake's reading of these small poems of L'Allegro and Il Penseroso have not been recorded by anyone. So by 1803 at least, we know that Blake had read the smaller poems. So his idea of these contrary poems, these companion poems, must have come from his reading of L'Allegro and Il Penseroso. Yes. Rosamond too says that the pleasures enumerated in L'Allegro all have the flat absence of any relationship to responsibility, which we sometimes call innocence. That is very important because there is a link between Blake's conception of innocence and Milton's conception of L'Allegro, the happy man, and thus there's a connection that links these two states with each other. will be a link to experience with Il Penseroso in the poem itself. So I will show that when I move to Il Penseroso. I chose some topics, some subtitles to show the connection between these two ideas of companion poetry, and rhythm is the first one. Unfortunately, I am not a prosodist, so I will not be too well versed in the theoretical aspects of prosody, but when I searched for the prosody of L'Allegro and Il Penseroso, they are metrically almost identical poems. The meters used in both poems are interchanging heptasyllabic and octasyllabic lines that sometimes have iambs, sometimes have trochees. So Milton masterfully shifts between heptasyllables and octosyllables to produce a chaotic, unpredictable rhythm within these poems. But when he uses these lines in L'Allegro's lines seem to skip and bound, which produces a youthful and jolly atmosphere, a youthful and jolly cadence within the lines. And in Il Penseroso, we have the same lines, same meters, but they produce a more grounded and methodical form of line, which shows us the contemplative version of the persona of Il Penseroso. L'Allegro literally means the happy man, and Il Penseroso literally means the thinker. Thus, the meters and rhythm Milton produces in these poems reflect the personas in both poems. The second point I want to highlight is the sounds used in the poems. In L'Allegro, especially the use of fricatives and short vowels form a more continuous, jolly, and lively cadence. The fricatives, especially, I will move on to the slides where I picked some examples from the poems themselves. So here, I am not saying that Milton used fricatives and short vowels only in L'Allegro or approximants and plosives in Il Penseroso, but the uses of these fricatives and short vowels in L'Allegro especially form a more continuous and lively cadence. While in Il Penseroso, we have more use of approximants and plosives coupled with long vowels and diphthongs, which cause a more static and interrupted cadence. That's how we move into the psyche of the thinker. We think, we contemplate, just like the thinker does. As John Kreiser says, the fleet unpredictability of the closing sections of L'Allegro, as opposed to the steady cumulative weight of those in Il Penseroso, are produced by Milton's masterful use of the rhythm. I will also focus on the imagery that differentiates the tone and cadence of these two poems. L'Allegro mostly focuses on mythical, pagan elements that produces a more primitive, pastoral, chaotic, and less controlled environment for the persona that the poem has. On the other hand, Il Penseroso is full of Christian elements. We move from the pastoral pagan primitive elements into a civilized and urban setting. This causes and produces an ordered, more in control environment for the thinker to become a more mature self of the persona or the poet. In L'Allegro, most of the colors mentioned bring to mind warm colors. The sun is the central image used in L'Allegro, and most of the time the morning or the day is celebrated. While in Il Penseroso, cool colors are used, and the moon is the central image, and night is celebrated instead of the morning. And we can see these in Blake's drawings of these poems. Here, I chose Blake's drawings as well, but as I said before, they were not produced before 1816. So although they are not directly representatives of Blake's idea of songs of innocence and experience, we can see similarities between his conceptions of innocence, experience, Il Penseroso, and L'Allegro. Both poems begin with an introductory part that derides and shuns the other mood as disruptive and destructive of poetry. The poet needs, for the persona of L'Allegro, the poet needs a more free, pastoral being, and melancholy is disruptive of this, because melancholy stops us from living happily, living freely. While in Il Penseroso, joys are shunned as being deluding, vain, and a production of folly. Thus, first of all, Milton gives us the setting for these two poems through similar words, similar voices, similar sounds, similar rhythms, and then he moves on to poems proper. In the poems proper, we can see the different uses of rhythm, words, sounds, especially. In L'Allegro, we see, but come thou goddess, fair and free, in heaven yclept Euphrosyne, and by men artising mirth, whom lovely Venus at a birth, with two sister graces more, to ivy crowned Bacchus bore. And here we can see also frolic, zephyr, violets, fresh blown, filth, thee, fair, blithe, all of the words used, almost all of the words used, are coupled with fricatives like the F sounds, TH sounds, V sounds, and thus forms a moving, flowing rhythm within the poem. Thus, when the reader goes through these lines, we can easily follow the meaning, follow the sounds and rhythm within each line. Although there are commas and full stops used, we can still move on even when we don't have an enjambment in play here. But in Il Penseroso, although we have similar outline of lines, we are forced to come to a stop at the end of the lines because of longer vowels or approximate sounds. But hail thou goddess, sage and holy, sage divinest, hail divinest melancholy, whose saintly visage is too bright to hit the sense of human sight, and therefore to our weaker view, o'erlaid with black state wisdom's hue, and the use of black, Memnon's sister might beseem, and nymphs. And as you can see, we are forced to come to a halt at the end of the lines most of the time. And even though there are enjambments here, the enjambments do not naturally flow into each other. Right. I cannot, I'm sorry. I cannot see that. Okay. The images used are especially important because in L'Allegro, as I said before, natural and pastoral images are used constantly. First of all, mirth is called the nymph as a nymph, hasty nymph, and bring with thee jest and youthful jollity, quips and cranks and wanton and wreathed smiles. No, sorry, quips and cranks and wanton wiles, nods and backs and wreathed smiles, such as hang on heap's cheek, as one word moves into the other with short vowels and easily sliding rhythm, we can hear the skips and bounds of a joyful, youthful rhythm within these lines. And we also have the mountain nymph, sweet liberty. So as we can see, L'Allegro is mostly portrayed as a pastoral scene where mirth and laughter and liberty and others hand in hand have natural joy, unrestrained joy. But in Il Penseroso, the image turns from pastoral to urban, from mythical to Christian. Come, pensive nun, devout and pure, sober, steadfast, and demure, all in robe of darkest grain, flowing with majestic train, and sable stole of cypress lawn o'er thy decent shoulders drawn. And here, clothing image is especially important because as for Blake's mythology, clothing shows a more earthly, more material existence. Thus, although Milton does not necessarily have the same conception of this idea, clothing is very symbolic of this change between mirth and melancholy. The imagery of the sun and the moon, the morning and the night, are especially important for these two states. Mirth is represented by the sun, and jollity is represented by the fire of the sun, where the great sun begins his state, robed in flames and amber light, the clouds in thousand liveries dight. So we have lively, warm colors filling the poem and showing us a happy atmosphere. But in Il Penseroso, the use of night and moon show us cooler colors. Thus, night, oft see me in thy pale career, till civil suited morn appear, not tricked and frowned as she was wont with the Attic boy to hunt, but kerchiefed in a comely cloud. Thus, all the colors in Il Penseroso are pale and clouded with pale clouds, thus darker and softer, cooler colors. The last images or the last sections of the poems represent us two different poets or poet personas. In L'Allegro, we have a youthful poet who dreams of such sights as youthful poets dream on summer eves but haunted stream. Then to the well-trod stage anon, if Johnson's learned talk be on, or sweetest Shakespeare, fanciest child, warble his native wood notes wild, and ever against eating cares, lap me in soft Lydian airs, married to immortal verse. And Blake's note for this drawing represents his idea of the youthful poets seeing the sun of imagination in his dream. So in his pastoral connection with nature, the youthful poet, does not see the sun as a guinea, as a round disc, just like a guinea, but he sees within it a host full of angels that cry, "Hail, hail, God Almighty." just like Blake says later in his life. But the poet of Il Penseroso closes himself off against nature in a night and hermitage, and may at last my weary age find out the peaceful hermitage, the hairy gown and mossy cell, where I may sit and rightly spell of every star that heaven doth show, and every herb that sips the dew, till all the experience do attain to something like prophetic strain. Thus, prophetic poetry that is separated from pastoral, imaginative, youthful poetry is highlighted. And here, especially, I highlighted the word experience because the poet of Il Penseroso, through his experience, through his lived life, produces his own poetry in seclusion from pastorality. This part is especially the point of controversy within Blake's studies. And Stephen Behrend says, Blake visually associates the poet of L'Allegro with the material, physical world of experience, and with the inferior, conventionalized poetry of the merely average versifier. He associates the poet of Il Penseroso with the imaginatively superior world of higher innocence, and directly with the poetic genius of Milton. I object to this idea because I believe, and Songs of Innocence and of Experience is will be a good example for this idea. I believe that Blake does not separate the poet of L'Allegro and the prophet of Il Penseroso as two different personas that are separated by time, youth, or old age. But he believes that I believe that Blake thinks these two poems show us the two different modes of perception of the same psyche. Thus, the poet could be feeling these two different modes of perception at the same time, moving from one to the other. Thus, I believe Blake incorporated all these into his poetry. He did not just copy Milton. He did not just take the idea or images and colors, but he made them his own, and he used these in his idea of two contrary states of the human soul. I wanted to use this layout because I used the design assistant of Microsoft, but no matter what I tried, I couldn't switch their places. So in these slides, sometimes the the drawings of Songs of Innocence will be in the second right-hand side. So I will try to warn you before. So here we have the Songs of Innocence drawing on the right side. And as you can see, the imagery is especially telling. So the frontispiece to Songs of Innocence has cooler colors of blue and green and white and gray. And the shepherd with his pipe is within a pastoral scene that is full of trees. It's a wooded area, and he steps forth with his left foot, which is representative of materiality for Blake. While in the Songs of Experience frontispiece, we have maybe the same shepherd transforming into the bard. His clothes change colors, which is representative of his growth or change of perception. The use of warm colors is especially important here because we see colors of red, orange, yellow, and he's stepping out of the woods. Now we see only 1 or 2 trees. He's not in the wooded area anymore, and he's stepping forth with his right foot, which is indicative of imaginative and prophetic strain. The use of sounds and musicality is especially important in some of the poems. I tried to pick and choose as many poems from Songs of Innocence and Experience as I could, but because of the time limit, I picked a few of them. So these are representatives of my points. So the introduction to the Songs of Innocence starts with piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee. On a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. So the use of fricatives and short vowels are especially producing a continuous lullaby-like song in the introduction to the Songs of Innocence. We follow a more pastoral image, pastoral character transforming into bard at the end of the poem. And this bard is shown in the introduction to the experience. And the sounds and the cadence used here differentiate this persona from the other significantly. Here, the voice of the bard, who present, past, and future sees, whose ears have heard the holy word that walked among the ancient trees. Thus, here Blake changes the meter. He changes the words. The words, the sound. He changes the sounds, and here the soft words, soft sounds of the introduction to the Songs of Innocence are changed into a harsh, more threatening and dangerous or apocalyptic imagery of the Songs of Experience. The Lamb and the Tiger are the two companion poems that show us the difference between the soft and harsh voices and Blake's use of them in order to display the illusory idea of protected world of a child or an innocent vision, and the dangerous and threatening nature of the experienced vision. So the lamb begins with, little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead. Gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly bright. And all the sounds and all the words, all the images used here are soft, soothing, mild, and meek, just as the lamb is. But the voices, the same sounds, maybe sometimes the same words used in the tiger produce a different cadence and different environment. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Thus, the use of different sounds produce a different perception of the same environment. The Nurse's Song, which is the Innocence version of the Nurse's Song, which is in the right-hand side here, is, as you can see from the drawings around it, full of pastoral imagery. The nurse and the children, who are clothed in cooler colors now again, are dancing in a field, in an open field. They are in close connection with nature, and the poem itself is adorned with images of birds, trees, flowers, and all the pastoral images. While the experience version of the Nurse's Song shows us a nurse who now wears a red robe, grooming a child in front of a house, in front of a door of a house, that gives us a urban setting, and the pastoral images in this poem, in these drawings, show us vines of grape. Vines of grape are tamed and urban images in that sense. And for Blake's symbolism, wine is representative of earthly connection. Thus, it moves from pastoral imagery into an urban imagery. And the last couple of poems I chose are Infant Joy and Infant Sorrow. In Infant Joy, the words used are simplistic, very short, and very safe words. And only 22 different words are used in Infant Joy. It is full of repetitions, and just like an infant, just like a baby, it repeats the same sounds and words repeatedly, and that turns into a lullaby-like poem. I have no name, I am but 2 days old. What shall I call thee? I happy am, joy is my name, sweet joy befall thee. So it is very soft, safe, and innocent. And the image that accompanies it is again pastoral. They are drawn within a flower, and the nurse again is wearing blue. But in Infant Sorrow, we have, although it looks shorter, although it encompasses a smaller space than Infant Joy, it has 35 different words, and all these words are different from each other. They are not repeated except words like I, father, my. So the words used here are dangerous, threatening, and frightening. My mother groaned, my father wept. Into the dangerous world I leapt, helpless, naked, piping loud, like a fiend hid in a cloud, struggling in my father's hands, striding against my swaddling bands. Oh, sorry, I cannot read because of the slides. Yes. Striving against my swaddling bands, bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my mother's breast. And the images here are taken from the pastoral setting into an urban setting. They are enclosed within a nursery. They are separated with drapes and curtains from other beds, and now they are in a bed. The nurse wears red robes. And so here I wanted to show that Songs of Innocence and Experience, although not directly copying Milton's idea of L'Allegro and Il Penseroso as companion poetry, Blake incorporated this idea that companion poems might complement each other into showing us that the psyche could reflect, the same psyche could reflect different perceptions of the same image or same idea through different uses of rhythm, sounds, imagery, cadence, and tempo. Thus, Blake's use of these altering senses of these images and rhythms is very reminiscent of Milton's use of companion poetry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramazan, for such a fascinating talk. I would now like to invite all participants to turn your cameras on and use the raise hand icon to ask questions or make comments. But before opening the conversation to the others, something interesting that you discuss in your talk is the parallels in terms of sounds and musicality. And just like Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience, L'Allegro e Penseroso was also set to music. As you know, and in Milton's case, to classical music, because Handel wrote the piece L'Allegro e il Penseroso e il Moderato, inspired by Milton back in 1740. So I was wondering if you think that Milton's L'Allegro e Penseroso could be as easily set to a popular tune like Blake so often has been. I did a quick search and I couldn't find any other setting apart from Handel's. So I was just wondering whether L'Allegro e Penseroso could make a really interesting pair of songs in a popular genre of music, say like prog rock with the long songs, with the long suites. So what do you think?
I would really like to listen to that. I have not listened to Handel's take on L'Allegro e il Penseroso because I tried to focus on the words and rhythm within Milton's poetry, and I didn't want to be influenced by them, if I may say. And I tried to listen to especially Allen Ginsberg's musical versions of Songs of Innocence and Experience, and I didn't like them too much. So this idea of musicality is very central to both collections of companion poetry, I think, and even without tunes and musical settings, I think they harbor within them this idea of musicality.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's hope that a prog rock band or some more experimental group or musician would eventually be interested in setting Milton to music, and it would be very interesting to compare Blake's Songs of Innocence to Milton in that kind of context, musical context. So yeah, but now for those who want to ask questions or make comments, you're very free. But now I just read a comment here in the chat. Someone, Nathan, said that speaking of progressive rock, John Anderson of Yes set one of the Innocence pieces, I believe. Yes, I think he did. He sang, if I'm not mistaken, Spring in the album Ramshackle by the drummer Alan White. I think in his solo album. Is that correct, Nathan?
That sounds right. I'm just going to have to now I'm going to have to scurry off and find the track. But I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thing and any other comments? So another comment here is Student Kim, and would you like to then to ask your question or comment on the presentation? Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. So thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. It's always a pleasure to go back to Songs of Innocence Experience. Well, especially because I think I'll be working on like late years of Blake. And it was also very like insightful to see some like similarities between L'Allegro and Il Penseroso.
Penseroso, yeah.
And I was wondering, like, so I guess I have two questions because I don't know much about this kind of like history. Is Milton the first person who started companion poems? And are you like arguing that Blake kind of like learned from Milton about this companion poems or sister poems as an inspiration? That would be my first question. And the second one is more of a comment than a question, because as I hear about the contraries and about like songs of innocence and experience, and also when it comes to marriage and heaven and hell, Blake is always trying to find this poetic language to talk about the contraries within people. And usually the person who comes to my mind when I'm thinking about those contraries is Swedenborg rather than Milton. So I was wondering if you have any like ideas about how both Swedenborg and Milton have influenced Blake, and whether we could like, have you ever thought about how to make Swedenborg's influence and Milton's influence to communicate and like put them in a dialogue when it comes to Blake studies?
These are both very good questions. Thank you. First of all, I am not sure, of course, if Milton was the first to write companion poems, but when I think of Milton's influence on Blake, because for Blake, the greatest influence in his writings is probably the Bible. And then I believe Milton comes as a close second, because he wrote extensively on Milton, he read extensively on Milton, and Milton is for him the greatest English poet that ever lived. So although there might be other poets that wrote companion poetry, I believe it was Milton's shorter poems that struck Blake as significant expressions of the contraries. And when it comes to Swedenborg, I believe Blake was very influenced by Swedenborg at first, but then his disillusionment with Swedenborg is written in Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and Songs of Innocence and Experience are, although written 5 years apart from each other, are written very close to Marriage of Heaven and Hell. I think it is after his disillusionment with Swedenborg. But again, although Blake doesn't like the idea of someone, he still could incorporate things that he finds right. That's why his idea of contraries as significant come from many different sources, not just Milton or Swedenborg or Bible or others. He brought together many different ideas and takes on contraries, and he formed his double vision in the first place, and then he moved on to the fourfold vision, thus transforming even those idea of contraries. That's what I believe.
Thank you, Don. And I think we have a question first from Pen Hackney.
Hi, yeah.
And then Joan.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramazan, very much. I particularly enjoyed the analysis and comparison of the two Milton poems, because as the prior person just said, they enjoy coming back to Songs of Innocence and Experience. I so enjoy going back to those Il Penseroso and L'Allegro. And I'm so glad you object to Barron's suggestion that there's different personae with one with a lesser or conventional poetics and the other with a superior or more imaginative. That's because they're both extremely imaginative and poetic, just different, and that your analysis of the differences is very helpful to me. So thank you for that. And I hope you or somebody could do something with the Milton poem itself, and how it relates, or does it relate to Milton's actual work. I've never been able to find much to work with there, but I have not studied the poem as much as others, I'm sure, have. So anyway, just thank you.
I haven't delved deep into Milton a poem myself yet, because it's complicated. It is very frightening, but at the same time, it's very thrilling to go into Milton a poem. I really want to do that someday.
I mean, something about Milton, the 17th century poet, got into his psyche like a, I don't know if it was a thorn or a balm or both, but he was living there.
Yes. Together with loss, they became one. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And next is Joan. So yes, if you can unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, everybody, and thank you for a wonderful presentation, which actually, for me, raised a few additional thoughts. One is that in 18th century poetry in general, the bard is mostly seen as an elder by comparison with younger poets. But if we take your approach, which I believe in, that innocence and experience are two sides of the same coin, then it's easier to understand poems like The Nurse's Song, where the child, on the one hand, is free, and on the other, bound and constrained by swaddling clothes. And to me, that puts a completely different dimension into songs of innocence and songs of experience and how they relate to each other, not by time, but by simultaneity. And
Yes.
I thought that that was an interesting implied perception in your talk. The other is the relationship of the sun and the moon. In general, for the Romantics, the moon is the heavenly body associated with creativity. But the way you've looked at it, and as you take a look at the oranges, the reds, the deep pinks in experience, it's like totally the reverse of the way other people treat the moon, creativity, and the sun as logic. And so Blake's inversion of those two in terms of imagery made a lot of sense to me. And I totally appreciated those aspects of your treatment of imagery in particular. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ramazan, we have a few comments in the chat.
Yes,
So,
I was reading them as well, and I would like to answer Suzanne Sklar's
yes,
first comment, talking about the coloring could be tricky because some of the versions have reddish warm colorings. And yes, this is very important because Blake constantly played with these colorings. And I especially picked this copy because it portrays this complete opposition of these two modes in different colorings. But even though he changes the colorings, I believe I haven't checked all the copies, unfortunately, but even then he uses this idea of colors as symbolic of different versions of the same psyche, different perceptions. And he uses, if he uses reddish warm colorings for innocent versions, he then switches the colorings of experience, thus protecting this idea of contraries within the colorings as well. But I need to check all the copies before I can clearly say that.
I think it would also be interesting to look at the first grouping, where it was just innocence. And then in 1793, it's innocence and experience. And then toward the end of his life, I think his watercolors became more translucent. There are some of the later ones that look like a Chagall. And so in that later part of his life, is there a different dynamic as well. The great thing, of course, would be to be able to see them all in person and have a trip around the world.
Of course. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. This is really interesting. Thank you.
Yes. John Dobson has a question or comment to make.
It's a comment.
Yes.
I have been interested in both Milton and Blake for well over 60 years now. I've been reading them both for 60 years. I'm also have quite a lot of background in history of art and history of music. And although this is not a question, first of all, I think this is one of the most interesting talks I've ever heard on both Milton and Blake, and I'd like to thank the speaker for that. And as I say, this is one of the best things I've heard in 60 years.
Thank you.
I am also a mathematician and interested in the nature of pattern, and I can see the common patterns in what you've said today, and also patterns in history, in art, and in music. And what I would like is if I could open a conversation with you by email. I think I would be interested in hearing what you have to say.
I would really like
that. 60 years experience in all of those subjects. So could I ask you, would you be prepared to open an email conversation with me?
Yes. I'm sending it via the chat, if it's okay with you.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
I think we could have some very interesting talks, because I have been interested in all of those things for well over 5 decades now.
I would really love that. Thank you.
But thank you very much for your talk. One of the most interesting talks on Blake and Milton that I've ever heard.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear this.
And I think we could have a useful talk together.
Thank you very much, John, and congratulations, Ramazan.
Thank you.
We have another comment here from Aaron, but because I think we missed the context, if Aaron could remind us of what he referred to when he mentioned the fact that part of your talk might have something to do with the fact that the innocence and experience can appear in either section, perhaps depending on Blake's mood.
I think
Aaron, I think
okay.
Yeah, so I was responding to Suzanne's point, actually. So if he changes the coloring on a specific print or edition, whatever we call it, it could be, because I think the line between innocence and experience is actually very thin. So again, Ramazan, I think you're right in kind of rejecting this very dualistic approach where it's like, I think reading Milton too, that Il Penseroso is this thing and Allegro is this, and when we have a one-to-one kind of correspondence with the Blake. I mean, maybe it's a little more true with Milton, but I think with Blake, he's very willing to switch the poems around. We know that some of the poems he would switch between innocence or experience, right? I love the way that the nurse's song changes, right? In Innocence, yes, it's very happy. The children asked to be let to stay out a little longer, and the nurse is like, fine. But then in Experience, the stanza starts the same, right? The poems start the same way, but there's a slight shift. And instead of voices of children on the green, it's the nurse just kind of has a reflection of her own past. And this gets her going into a kind of envious spiral. And all of a sudden it darkens, right? And all of a sudden she reacts kind of petulantly or even violently towards the children. So yeah, all of those ways in which the nurse figure can be open and gracious, but then she also, her hands can kind of
restricting.
Yeah, she can clamp around the heads of the children. Sometimes her hands will get kind of threatening. And if you don't look too closely, you don't notice it, but you're really looking for it. You're like, wait a minute, she's turned, right?
Yes.
Something as
The
kind of
same,
old.
the same goes for Echoing Green as well. The different versions of Echoing Green has the
Mhm.
same idea as the Nurse's Song. It starts off happily pastoral, all as if there's no worries or dangers in the world. And in the experience version, we see a world that is wrought with those dangers, that is stripped away from this innocent state. So there are many more poems I could have included, but I had to choose.
But the real Blakean point is that it's just this subtle change of perspective in the nurse, right? So you're in her head and you're seeing the same scene, but all of a sudden she sees it through the lens of envy and jealousy as she kind of thinks about her own lost youth. I would just say one last thing. I've been setting music of Blake in the last year to kind of pop or folk melodies. So Camilla, I was just going to answer your question about whether Milton might be set. Milton's really, really tough for popular music because of his long extended phrases, which of course he's part of his brilliance, right? But I wouldn't want to touch, I mean, Paradise Lost would be the worst, but I wouldn't even want to touch, I mean, look at that first sentence of either of the two poems, right? They're these long extended phrases. So those are tough. Prog rock, maybe, folk musicians.
Yeah, that's the only genre I can think of.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In terms of popular music, or maybe a jazzy piece, because they've got time, right? They usually experiment with long melodies and so extended melodies for the matter. Yeah, but thank you, Aaron. I have another comment here from Tamsin. Well, but before that, we got Mike. I seem to recall that a number of the metaphysical poets wrote companion poems. Perhaps this was also a source of inspiration.
As I said before, I'm not really sure about that. I know that we know that Blake read Milton extensively, but I'm not sure if he read the companion poems of the metaphysical poets or that he was influenced by them. So I will not be able to answer that.
Yeah, we've got another raising hand here from Elif.
Hello, and first of all, I would like to thank you for the amazing and insightful presentation. I don't think I would have connected the dots myself if someone didn't come out here and tell me how to do it. So it was amazing to listen to and be informed about this. I do have a question because as you mentioned also, Milton was a greatly favored artist by Blake. But if I remember correctly, he was also criticizing Milton's view on divinity and the way he interpreted that in his works, especially in Paradise Lost, if I remember correctly. And I was curious if you think William Blake's creativity was actually stemming in a way from the way that he was idolizing Milton as an artistic persona, however, while improving and stacking over what he observed from Milton, because Milton was very morality based, very stigmatic. And I believe that Blake wanted to take something from Milton because, as you said, he was not copying. He was basically creating something on his own while just carrying on the legacy of Milton. And I was wondering if we were to compare the poems and the works of Blake before Milton, before he got introduced to Milton, and after Milton's influence, if we would be able to see a difference in his levels of creativity.
This is very important because his poem, Milton, a poem, is is the representation of this. He says that Milton was not happy in heaven. He had to self-annihilate and then move back to earth, become one with Blake, and show people that his ideas in Paradise Lost especially were taken on the surface level and were misguiding because they were used as weapons of morality, if I may say. Thus, he tried to change the perception of Milton or within the psyche of the people as well. So Milton was right in doing some things, but also he was wrong in some things. Blake was really liberal, if I can use that word, with his influences. He took what he thought was right and he criticized what he thought was wrong. So he did not doggedly follow someone. He did not slavishly become a protege of someone. So his take on Milton was very respectful, but at the same time critical at the same time. So your question is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elif. Tamzin has a comment. I think she's got problems with connection, so I think she preferred to write. She says that Blake's choices of color might well also have been influenced by what was available in pigment form. The period between 1704 and 1828, I think it's 1804, saw a massive expansion of colors and types of pigment available. Oh yes, he's talking about 1704. And during this time, colors like chrome yellow very suddenly became much cheaper after new deposits were found. There was also the chemical isolation of zinc, which enabled different opacity of white being developed, so pastel colors could be created, or lighter, brighter reds. The development of chemical knowledge during this time was extraordinary. So yes, it's always good to have a word from a designer and painter as well. Thank you very much, Tamzin.
Thank you.
And Suzanne also mentioned that we know that Blake knew John Donne. He did engraving for Donne edition. Yes, and
yes, but I'm not sure if he wrote anything. Well, there is a short poem or short letter. He mentions John Donne's poetry, but I don't remember that. I read it, but I forgot about it. So thank you, Suzanne. I don't remember how he takes Donne's poetry.
I think she wants to say something. So
I think the imagery in the tiger, what the hammer, what the chain, of God as a blacksmith is related to batter my heart, three-person God for you as yet, but not breathe, shine, and seek to mend. Because God is a blacksmith in that first quatrain, and God seems to be a blacksmith in the tiger. So I've often wondered, did that come from John Donne?
I think it might be more related to the blacksmith gods of mythologies like Vulcan or Hephaestus, but of course, John Donne's idea could be incorporated into that, and his later conception of loss is very similar to the blacksmith god of the tiger.
Yeah. But in Donne, the idea is that you have to be broken in order to be whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's when I think about contraries, that poem is full of contraries.
Yes.
For I, except thou enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except thou ravish me. The whole thing is a network of contraries.
Mm-hmm.
And when Blake read everything he could get his hands on, so I can't imagine if he was doing an engraving job, he would read the text.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Barbara, yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to unmute.
Yeah, no,
can you hear
me?
Yes.
This may be a small thing, and thank you for such an interesting talk. I really enjoyed revisiting all the poems that you've talked about. And I just wanted to remind ourselves of that moment in Milton where Milton appears on Blake's left foot.
Yes.
I think that's wonderful. And it was in his cottage garden at Felpham. And the poem says, I beheld Milton with astonishment. I love it.
Yes. I wanted to add that scene where All Alone descends into the garden, because I
Yes.
love that painting as well. It's very small and very full of detail.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of Milton descending from and entering from Blake's Tarsus. That represents St. Patrick, I think, on some St. Paul. So it's full of references. It's full of biblical references and Miltonic references. I love that part as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. John wants to come in.
Yeah,
Joan first, sorry. Can you unmute yourself, Joan? Just click at the bottom.
I think I got,
Yes.
my eyesight is failing, so please excuse me, I'm sorry. Two things. One is that when we start to talk about coloration in any of these, we have to now take into consideration Catherine's participation in Blake's work.
Yes.
And more people are recognizing that. So it's very, very difficult to say that only Blake was making these decisions on color. Once, a long time ago, at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, they had a copy of the tiger, which someone had painted with spots instead of stripes. And that was my first reminder that we can't exactly always say that Blake made this, that, and the other copy of this sheet of paper. The other thing is that in addition to high-end poetry, Donne, Milton, and the like, Blake was also very much influenced by fables that were written for children, and particularly fables like the collection, The Fables of Flora, from which he took the sunflower as an opposite to the fable in that collection. So people like John Gay, for example, who wrote Companion Fables, were also influential in Blake's shorter poems. And we don't want to leave out, I think, the folk influence on Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. At least I perceive them to be very strong in that. Thank you.
I think songs for children were very popular back then, and Blake formed his own idea of songs for children, and he is criticizing those songs for limiting or clipping the wings of the children. That's why he shows two different perceptive moments. One innocent, completely protected from the outside world, but that protection is illusory and harbors dangers behind it. So those dangers are there, and if we ignore that, the innocent vision becomes halved. And if we ignore the innocence, we are left with a dangerous world that we are not protected from, and that is half as well. So we need to bring them together.
Thank you very much, Joan. And Dawn now.
Yeah, I was just following this like wonderful conversation. It just makes me think so much about Innocent Experience and also like other colorings of Blake. I had 2 points, but one of them, thankfully, Joan has already like mentioned because I wanted to say something about Catherine. The second point that I also wanted to like maybe suggest, or my point of view, is that when it comes to the Songs of Innocent Experience, the illustrations usually go along well with the text, but sometimes they don't, right? So when it comes to the like, was it a lost, a
The
girl
little girl
lost?
lost.
Yeah, a
Oh,
little girl lost.
yeah.
Like it talks about a little girl who was lost, but when it comes to the illustrations, we see a full-grown woman, and she is going to like mature, and she's going to be with a man. And also when it comes to the little fly, we don't see a fly in
Yes,
in the illustration. So
but we
I
see a
wonder-
little child.
yeah, and the nurse maybe like I don't know, handmaid.
Yep.
But like, so how the way I approach Songs of Innocent Experience in a fun way is to see the illustrations as the companion to the text itself. So because like when it comes to, let's say, a little fly, it's about like am I a fly like thee? The speaker is talking about how subtle and very like obscure the boundary between a human being and a non-human. But when it comes to the illustrations, we see children playing with their nurse or their mother. So it just doesn't like Blake never gives us the perfect clear answer about his poems and illustrations, and I just thought that maybe his like desire to pursue the contraries that he believes in were like, it's just all over the places. It's in his pigments, it's in his illustrations that sometimes even contrast the text. Yeah,
Because
so
because his paintings produce a new form of grammar, syntax, and language in itself. His painting complements the poetry, not just describes it, because most of the time the painting is just there to show us what the poem says. But for Blake, they have two different meanings, and when they are brought together, they form a different layer of meaning. Blake said, I'm paraphrasing, just as poetry doesn't have a line that is not important, painting doesn't have a leaf of grass that is not important. So for him, everything he wrote, everything he painted, every single detail is significant, and they are brought together to form a greater meaning. So
yeah, I think you already know this book, but Blake's composite art, I think that's the classic, that's kind of like a classic theory in like not only in art history, but like in general sense of like understanding the how like, was it Mitchell?
Mitchell, yes.
W.J.T. Mitchell, yeah.
Yes.
So the way he kind of like illustrates how we could understand like almost opposite, but like just incongruous coexistence of the illustration and the text. I think
sister arts,
that book has like amazing like analysis. So I think you would like it.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Dawn. And Douglas?
Yes, well, first, thank you very, very much for doing this. I had not been familiar with these works of Milton's before, and reading these is just feel like I've found a buried treasure or something. These are just so wonderful, and I really appreciate your connections that you've made on these. I have several questions for you. First, do you know if Blake was familiar with the nursery rhymes of Cowper?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure where I saw that, but he was familiar with the contemporary nursery rhymes of the time, and that Songs of Innocence and Experience are.
They had the same publisher, so I would assume that through Joseph Johnson, that perhaps that would have been a connection there. And I really appreciated the comment that she made about the contradiction between in The Little Girl Lost, between the illustration and the and the poem, and that I see that particular poem as both it's his version of some classical myths, but it's a transformation of the character, and that I feel like it's an example of where Blake doesn't want to wrap everything up with a bow and hand it to you. He wants you to ask the question yourself and the contradictions. And of course, the great contradiction is the cuddly little tiger that he has in the poem of the tiger.
It's very comical. The painting is very comical.
Yeah,
there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, his monsters are often that way. But I also feel in the tiger, it seems to me that the narrator isn't the bard any longer. There was a piece by Harold Bloom where he said that the narrator is more similar to Job than to the ancient bard, which gives me a completely different way of. It's that same idea of that it's questioning the maker.
I believe the bard is speaking, but in a sense, the bard is not completely sure of his prophetic strain. So the bard is not a character for me in the Songs of Experience. The bard is not completely transformed or completely standalone figure. So the bard is in the process of transformation. He is in the introduction, he sees the past, present, and future, but he could not bring them together yet. He is seeing them separately, and his separate perception causes him to lament the loss of the earth. So he calls the earth to come back. He calls the earth lapsed and fallen, but it is his inability to comprehend all past, present, and future at the same time. He is in a sense of in a process of transformation, and that's why he is the one that frames the tiger. The reader or the bard or the speaker, in this sense, is the one that frames the tiger himself. So because he sees it as dangerous, that's the way he transforms it into the fearful, symmetrical being that the tiger is. So that's what I believe.
Thank you. Last question is a little off point. I read an essay once, a short essay on the poem "The Sick Rose." Did you write something about that? Was that you that wrote?
No, not yet.
About that being
not
about George Rose, the treasurer at the time, proposing something that Blake didn't like, and that there's a sort of double meaning to that poem.
No, I didn't write on the Sick Rose yet, but I have a bit of the Sick Rose in my doctoral dissertation. So I'm trying to turn it into, I'm working on it to turn it into a book. So maybe later.
Yeah, well, yeah, the essay related it to a person named George Rose, who was contemporary of Blake.
Thank you.
Thank you
I will
very
check that.
much.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? It's your last chance. Okay, I think we had quite a few interesting questions and comments and people congratulating and praising your presentation. So thank you very much, Ramazan.